Grip socks are great, and now they're even better with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Better fit, moisture wicking, amazing comfort, and all the extra grip you need. Choose from 10 different colors for just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
At this point, every major football boot brand is focusing on one thing and one thing only, that thing being tech. And with all of this new tech comes hype and promises of improved performance. And while the marketing from these big football boot brands is hugely influential to the average consumer, the reality is the majority of this tech does little to nothing at all. However, there are certain technologies that truly change football boots moving forward. A few examples would be the 1994 Adidas Predator, the 2002 Nike Mercurial Vapor 1, the 2010 Adidas F50 Adizero, and the 2014 Nike Magista Obra. These are all football boots that changed the football boot industry in one way or another for the technology that they introduced. It's now 2022, and Nike might, keyword being might, have changed the game again with their latest football boot technology. Ladies and gentlemen, the super limited special edition Nike Mercurial Air Zoom Ultra, limited to just 1,000 pairs worldwide, all sold out of course, bearing a retail price of $350. Similar to the Flyknit Ultra that came before it, this is effectively a test bed, an early look, a preview of what is to come from the future of not just the Mercurial series, hence Mercurial in the name, but likely the entire Nike brand moving forward when it comes to football boot technology, in that this is the first one to incorporate a full-length 4.5mm Zoom Air unit running from heel to toe, taken directly from the KD12 basketball shoe, all in the name of energy return. It sounds and looks awesome, but is it actually revolutionary? Is this the next big technology in football boots? Well, yes and no, and to make that statement even more confusing, I am both really disappointed and also really excited for the future of Air Zoom tech in Nike football boots. Let me explain. And as always, if you guys do end up enjoying the video, love the detailed tech overview, please don't forget to support it with a like. And if you are new here watching for the first time and aren't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022. So first things first, we're going to start with the sole plate and the Air Zoom tech, because that really is the focus of this football boot and the key technology that may or may not be revolutionary. And I think what's most interesting right off the bat is the fact that this is a sole plate that's constructed in a different way than basically any other football boot that we've seen before, and that this Synergia sole plate is one single piece of plastic with no extra reinforcement. It's effectively a two-piece design where you have your sole plate on the outside, then with the laces removed, you can see inside the football boot you do have your standard insole, which I'll remove, give you guys a look at that. You can see it's got a little cutout that is the exact shape of the 4.5mm Zoom bag that sits directly underneath the insole and runs the full length of the football boot, sitting directly on the top side of this sole plate, basically making up the entire bottom of the football boot rather than having multiple layers of material. And Nike is really showing off this two-piece construction by making the Zoom unit blue in the heel and then red through the forefoot and midfoot, because with the sole plate being made from a translucent plastic, you can actually see the Zoom unit from the bottom of the foot, which is not only cool visually, but I just love the idea that they're building a football boot in a way that we've really never seen before. And at least in my eyes, having less layers and less pieces to a pair of football boots should make for better overall durability, or at the very least, less things that could go wrong. As for the Zoom unit itself, there's not a lot that I can show in terms of how it actually feels. If I just squish it with my finger, it's only 4.5mm thick, so it doesn't really have a lot of visible compression, and it shouldn't. It's still meant to be very low profile, and you still feel very close to the ground and connected to the football boots despite that Zoom unit underneath your feet. Again, I think one of the benefits of having only two pieces of material effectively making the base of this football boot. What I will say is that Nike's promise of energy return, which is really the focus around implementing Air Zoom tech in the first place. It's something that they've made headlines with over the last several years in the running shoe area. And this is something pulled from a basketball shoe. It doesn't feel anything like the super thick sole running shoes that Nike have been putting out over the last several years. And in terms of actual beneficial energy return, truthfully, I just don't feel it. Now, it must be said that this is not the first time that Nike have incorporated a zoom unit in a pair of football boots. It used to be part of the Air Zoom Tiempo Legend 1 and 2, where they had a little zoom unit in the heel. T90 Laser 1 had that. The Nike Match Mercurial had zoom units in the forefoot as well as in the heel. It's been done before, but definitely not to this extreme, and definitely not in a way that feels quite as unique as these do. When this technology was first shown off back in the Innovation Summit of 2020 that Nike held, I was optimistic that best case scenario, this was gonna have a slightly bouncy feel underfoot. You'd be able to feel at least the slightest bit of energy return. And truthfully, I can't say that's the sensation that you get from this zoom unit. However, as a major positive, and I think something that makes this potentially the next revolution in football boots, or at the very least, something that will pull people into the Nike brand, is the comfort aspect on offer from this zoom unit running from heel to toe. Football boots as a whole are pretty hard on your feet. If you compare the experience of running in a pair of football boots versus running in a pair of premium running shoes, there is no comparison. The running shoes are significantly more comfortable, and a lot of that has to do with underfoot cushion. And of course, if you're playing on a really well-kept pitch, there's going to be cushion built into the playing surface. However, I think a lot of us don't play on super well-kept pitches. You might even play on slightly firmer, harder pitches, which is why firm ground stud patterns tend to be the most popular. And for those of you playing on artificial grass, those tend to have even less cushion to them. So implementing something like a full-length zoom bag, even though it's only 4.5 millimeters thick, the amount of cushion and impact protection that this provides compared to anything else that I've ever tried in the realm of football boots makes this very, very special compared to just about anything. So even though Nike is touting this as an energy return element, something that's going to give you that responsiveness where when you step down, it's going to spring you back up, even if it's just ever so slightly, I don't really get that sensation, but what I do get is an incredible amount of underfoot comfort and impact protection that no other football boot provides. Perhaps in the future, with the development of this technology, the energy return aspect will become a thing, but as it is right now, especially considering that this is effectively a prototype football boot that we're able to purchase, even though they only released 1,000 pairs, I'm really, really impressed with how this feels. And from an underfoot comfort perspective, I don't think there's been anything else like this before. So to circle back to what I said earlier in the video, I think the tech is disappointing from the standpoint that the performance gains, the responsiveness, the energy return isn't necessarily there to the extreme that Nike is perhaps promising in their marketing material, but I think there is potential for something revolutionary from a tech perspective in terms of impact protection and overall comfort, which is something that I am personally very impressed with. As for the sole plate itself, unlike the current run of Mercurials, this is not a split sole, it's one single piece of plastic. And from a flex standpoint, the zoom unit doesn't seem to restrict the flex of the sole plate all that much. And if anything, I would argue that this is actually a more flexible feel than what you find from the current generation of top-end Mercurials. The anatomic shaping of the sole plate doesn't seem to be there either, although it does have a slightly contoured shape along the edges. And in general, I really felt like my foot was well contained on the base of the sole plate paired up with that zoom unit. And I think that might have a lot to do with the fact that it's just 2 layers of material, again, giving you this very connected sensation to the base of the football boot. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, this is the FG layout, the only one available for the Air Zoom Ultra, and actually one that we'd seen previously on the GS360. Very Mercurial-esque in terms of its stud design, where you have these 3-sided shapes as kind of the variation over what's currently available. And as far as bite is concerned, it's super aggressive, plenty of traction, and really no complaints from me, as good as any Mercurial stud pattern that we've seen over the last several years. But what about weight? And of course there are a bunch of differences between the Air Zoom Ultra and the current Mercurial Vapor 14 Elite, but I feel like this is a pretty good comparison in terms of what the Vapor 15 might end up being, and is this zoom unit across the bottom of the foot adding a significant amount of weight or decreasing the overall weight of the football boots? Well, on a scale in real time, both in the same size 9.5 US, we're about to find out, starting off with the current Vapor 14 Elite, 7.2 ounces, the equivalent of 204 grams. Remember those numbers, and we'll change the scale back to ounces, throw on the Air Zoom Ultra, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.05 ounces, the equivalent of 200 grams. So effectively, these two football boots are the same weight, but for the sake of being really specific, technically this new model with the new technology is 4 grams lighter, which in my opinion is really impressive considering how different they feel underfoot. As for the upper, there's a lot of new tech happening there as well, where when a variation of this football boot was first shown off at the 2020 Nike Innovation Summit, that boot actually had a fly print upper, which is Nike's 3D printed upper technology. And if you read the tech specs for the new Air Zoom Ultra on Nike's own website, they specify that this is a 3D printed textile, but don't mention the word fly print. How that makes any sense and how this is different at all from actual fly print, I'm not entirely sure, but for what we know, it's a 3D printed textile that is not fly print, but is entirely different from any other upper material we've ever seen on a pair of Mercurials. And here's where I have some good or bad news, depending on your preferences when it comes to Mercurials if you've been wearing them for a long time. While this does very much have kind of a knitted-like look to it with the grid pattern that is very clear to see, and some textile materials as a base kind of lining the high wear or high stress areas of the upper, this is a material that feels very much like a raw thin synthetic. The closest thing I can relate it to is the Teijin synthetic found on the Vapor 11 and maybe the Vapor 10. It's really raw. It's very pingy. There is no softness, there is no padding to it, and honestly, to the touch, it doesn't actually feel very good. It almost feels borderline rough and plasticky, but surprisingly, when you get them on your feet, they're remarkably pliable while still having a really good balance of structure, kind of giving you that classic Mercurial feel. The shape is a little bit different, I'll say that much, but in general, if you liked the Teijin synthetic days of the Mercurial Vapor and Superfly, this is definitely Nike trending back towards that type of touch on the ball and general sensation. They've even reintroduced flywire cables as a reinforcement element through the midfoot on both the lateral and medial side, running directly into 2 different lacing positions and then back into the base of the sole. Basically a structured cable that doesn't allow those areas of the boot to stretch without causing too much pressure on your feet. Very similar actually to what was originally seen on the Superfly 1, but perhaps even more recently in the form of the Brio cables, effectively flywire, seen on the Superfly 4. I also really like how they added this reinforcement strip that basically runs the entire length of the forefoot on both the lateral and medial side. And then you can see even at the tip of the toe, they added an additional reinforcement strip in basically the high wear zones of the football boots in hopes of improving the overall durability on what is a very thin upper. Something else that is more or less being reintroduced, in that the last time we saw it was on the Mercurial Vapor 9, is a central lacing system with a standalone tongue. So you can see the laces have a single lace hole. They run all the way to the top, and then with the laces removed, you actually have a physical tongue that can move around from side to side. It doesn't really shift all that much when you're playing in the boots, which I quite like. The base of it is this microfiber material along the outside edges. It's that same kind of 3D printed textile through the middle, and it even has this memory foam insert, basically running the length of the tongue to cut down any lace bite and in general just improve the comfort with the laces tied tight across the top of your foot. Really like this design. It also makes putting the boots on and taking them off significantly easier. And then if we shift even further to the rear, you're going to notice that this reverts back to a much more traditional low-cut construction without the mock fly knit collar, being that there is no fly knit to be found here. We have an internal plastic heel counter, and the heel is lined in this soft microfiber material with plenty of padding and great lockdown all the way through the entire boot. In order to truly understand the Air Zoom tech, you kind of just have to put these boots on, and not even so much from a try-on perspective where you're just kind of standing around in the football boots. You'll get an idea of how they fit that way, but once you actually start playing and running around, I think is when you actually realize how different these feel underfoot compared to any other football boots that we've seen before. The Air Zoom tech, 4.5 millimeters thick, it's very thin. You don't feel like there's a significant amount of material or mass underneath your feet. You still feel very connected and low to the ground, but there's a significant amount of impact protection. I don't want to call it cushion because it doesn't really feel like I'm squishing down into anything, but there's just that level of absorption from that Zoom bag that's eliminating the harsh kind of slamming to the ground that you would typically feel with a traditional insole plastic sole plate setup. And of course, there is some additional cushion coming from the foam insole sitting on top of that Zoom unit, but you definitely feel it underneath your feet, kind of absorbing that little bit of impact. And again, giving you this comfort sensation that I've never experienced from another pair of football boots. The upper, on the other hand, is definitely on the more rigid side. It has more of a plasticky feel than the Flyknit uppers that we're used to having on the Mercurial series over the last several generations. Again, kind of relating it back to the Tajin synthetic days of the Mercurial Vapor and Superfly series. It's stiffer than the last several uppers for sure, but definitely not early Superfly 1, 2, or 3 stiff. There's a rigidity to the upper, but it also feels pliable. It's certainly very well structured, and the boots as a whole feel very responsive. Of course, with the more traditional design, you kind of get that flaring around the ankle with its low-cut construction, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's something that's going to vary a lot from person to person. And me being slightly flat-footed, when you have an upper that has that more kind of rigid, plasticky sensation, there is that little bit of foot cramping that I experienced over the first 20 minutes or so. But once my feet got used to the football boots, it wasn't an issue at all. And overall, despite the somewhat underwhelming feel of the upper in hand, once you get a little bit of wear time, they actually ended up feeling a lot better than I was expecting, and the touch on the ball is great. The texturing of the upper as well provides that little bit of additional grip that I also really enjoyed. As far as width is concerned, they definitely have some decent width to them. I would say there's more volume to these than what you're gonna find from the current generation of Mercurials, where width-wise, I don't wanna say that they are significantly wider, but there's definitely more room through the forefoot and toe box area. They're a little bit more rounded, not to the point where I think these are gonna be ideal for somebody with really wide feet, but they're definitely wider than the current generation Mercurials. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you're looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I think there's a lot to be excited about for the future of Air Zoom tech in Nike football boots moving forward. I think we can almost definitely guarantee that this is a sole plate, or at least a sole plate design, that is going to be very similar to what we'll find on the next generation of Mercurial Vapor and probably Superfly. Not sure if they're going to separate the Vapor and the Superfly and maybe only give the Superfly the Air Zoom tech. That remains to be seen. But as a responsiveness element, I think it is a little bit disappointing, but from a comfort perspective, it is something that I do believe could be very revolutionary and would draw a lot of people into wearing a Nike football boot over any other brand. Really happy with how this feels and super excited for what's to come.